Okay, so you guys just learned about monocots and dicots and the differences in the leaves. There are differences in the seeds, the stems, and the flower. So everywhere you look, if you're paying attention, you can see the differences. We're going to go through the parts of a flower, and then you're going to end up drawing all the parts of the flower. Right away, if I see one of the leaves under here, I can see that it weirdly is yellow, which is not supposed to be, but it has parallel veins. And then I should see, this is a monocot, so I should see multiples of 3. And if I first start with the petals, I'm going to pull this off. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, I just pulled off a male part. Sorry. 5, 6. Okay, so multiples of 3 for a monocot. There are 6 petals, which have pollen and sperm all over them, which is kind of gross, but that's the point of all of this. Once you pull off the petals, all you have left are the male and female reproductive parts. So those petals smell good and they look pretty so that bugs will come into the flower to help the flower out, because for reproduction, it needs the help of a bug. Plants cannot get up and go anywhere and do anything, so they've got to get things to help them. So there's 2 different things. You can see it really clearly on this flower. This is a lily, that's why I chose it. These are the male parts. Oops, one just fell off. There's 1, 2, and I'm just going to pull them off. Sorry, plant. 3, that's sperm everywhere. This is sperm. 4, 5, 6. Once again, everything's in multiples of 3 because this is a monocot. If this was a dicot, it might have multiples of 4, so maybe it would have 8 of these. Or multiples of 5, so it might have 5, or it might have 10 of these. So we're going to be drawing this part. This is just the filament to hold it up so that a bug will run into it. This top part called the anther is the part that has the pollen on it. So this stuff is pollen. It's just a half cell. It's the sperm for the flower. So flower is male and female at the same time. So these parts right here are the male part. And that is the sperm. This is the female part of the flower. And it's really quite big on this flower. Your flower might not be this big depending on what flower you get. Just had to get that all over the floor now. So the female part has 3, the whole thing's called a pistil. And I always think of like maybe a little kid who's a little girl who's a little sassy, a little spicy, and maybe she's like a little pistil. That's what I think of. So that's how I remember that this is the pistil. And that it's female. I think of a little sassy girl. The male part is stamen, and it literally has the word men in it. And it is the male part. Pistil is the female part. And there are 3 sections to the female part. The top, which is sticky, this, and this. The top part is called the sticky stigma. Actually, it's just called stigma, but I call it sticky stigma. And there's actually a hole right in the middle. Do you guys notice that this is in a multiple of 3? So when I look at it, there's like a little lobe here, a little lobe here, and a little lobe here. So it is a multiple of 3, and there is a hole right there. So basically, if a sperm gets here, I'll do it. This is like rated R. There. If a sperm gets on this sticky stigma, it'll travel through that hole, down this, there's a tube in here. This is called a style. So, like if I ever had a band, maybe I would call it stigma style, or sticky stigma style. And sometimes if you look inside of it, you can actually see that it's a tube, and that there's a hole in there. So when you guys get your flower, maybe you can try to see if you can see that this is a hole. There's a hole. Eventually it'll get down to the last part of the flower. This is the ovary right here. And the ovary itself actually is where the baby will grow if the sperm gets to the egg. There's eggs hiding in here. And we want the sperm to get to the egg. So we want the sperm to get to the egg. So so that there can be a baby in there. So the ovary, which is this part right here, if this was an apple tree, this would turn into the fruit, this part of the flower right here, only if the sperm gets to the egg. Just cut it off. In other plants, it'll swell up and become some other sort of seed. In an apple tree, this swells up to be this. And there's eggs in here. The other cool part about this is that even this is in multiples of 3. And you can see like 6 little bumps in 3 bigger sections, and that is the ovary, which will swell up. Because it's a monocot, everything's in 3s. You're about to do a lab where you look at fruits, and your job is to tell me, is it a monocot or a dicot? If this were to swell up, it would still have that same organization. So on the test too, I'll give you a fruit, and I'll cut it in half for you. And when I do that, you have to tell me, is it a monocot or a dicot? And you can tell when you look at any fruit, even a blueberry. I'll go get a blueberry. I have a couple different fruits here. So for example, if I cut the apple in half, oops, I cut a baby, sorry. This has a symmetry of 5. That immediately tells me that it is a dicot, because dicots have a symmetry of 4 or 5. If I cut this pepper in half, this is a very swollen flower, there's babies in there. I see 3 sections, 1 big one, 2, 3. This is a monocot. 1, 2, 3 sections. And that's the other part of the flower that it was hanging off of. And there's all the babies. Or a blueberry. Okay. So all fruits, all flowers, all plants in general have this symmetry. You guys are about to do a flower dissection where you will pull all of these things apart as well. But before we do that, I'm going to have you draw the flower with me. So if you go to your table of contents, this is worth points. You're going to go to the back, and you're going to draw this right here. We're going to draw a flower. And we're going to label all the parts that I just talked about. So this is going to be one of the worst drawings ever. There's petals. And those are designed to attract insects, or sometimes other things like there's actually a bat or hummingbirds. And then there is the female part. And the entire female part is called a pistil. And it has 3 sections. This part is sticky. It's called the sticky stigma. I call it sticky stigma. There is a tube running down this part. This is called style. The tube itself is called the pollen tube. So this whole part is called the style, but the tube is a pollen tube, which makes sense because the little pollens are supposed to go down that tube, and they will get to this section, which has the eggs in it. And this section right here of the flower is the ovary. And if it gets fertilized, this is the part that swells up into a fruit. Then there's the male part, which there are many of them. The entire male part is called the stamen. This is the male part of the flower. This top section is called the anther. This is called the filament. And the little dots on the anther are the pollen. Flowers want insects to come and get pollen all over them, and then they want them to land, preferably on another plant, in the flower and accidentally get pollen right on the sticky stigma so that it can go down and fertilize the eggs. So if we don't have bees, there's no way for or insects in general, there's no way for the sperm to get to the egg, and then all of your fruits and vegetables would disappear. So insects are helpful. There we go, that's it. Parts of a flower. So what you guys are going to do for homework is you are going to look at this yellow paper that you have towards the back of your notebook. You're going to tell me up here what each part is. So for example, these things in the background are petals. And then down here where it says the same letter, you're going to tell me what the petal is for. I would say to attract insects. And insects are there to help with reproduction. And the only one that's a little tricky in here is, I think, H. These are called sepals. It's the bottom of the flower. They're like little green, some flowers have like little green coverings at the bottom. And they give you the name pistil for the whole part of the female. They're talking about the sticky stigma, style, ovary, those are eggs. And then they give you the whole name for the male part. This would be the filament, the anther, and then these little dots are the pollen. And I need you to say what each thing is down here. So A is pollen, and I would say A is basically sperm for a plant. And you're going to fill this out. There is a picture on the back. You don't have to do anything with it, but it might help you because what each part is written down at the bottom. Okay, good luck to you. That should be done as homework.